That night began like so many others, quiet, forgettable, almost comforting in its sameness. I told myself I would be quick. Just a short walk to the market, a few items, then back home before the streets grew too empty. The air was cool, carrying the mixed smells of dust and fried food, and the sky hung low and dark, as if it were listening. At home, things had been tense in a way neither of us wanted to name. Conversations ended early. Silences lasted too long. My partner's eyes were always somewhere else, fixed on a phone screen or lost in thought. I told myself it was nothing serious, that relationships naturally drift and return like tides. Still, I left the house feeling oddly unseen, like a shadow moving through familiar rooms. The street lights flickered as I walked. Each step echoed louder than it should have, my sandals tapping against the pavement in an uneven rhythm. Shops were closing, metal shutters groaning as they rolled down. A stray cat darted across the road, startling me enough to make my heart jump. I laughed at myself, whispering that I was being foolish. I thought about the things I would cook, the small domestic plans that made life feel stable. I thought about how, lately, I seemed to be the only one making plans at all. That thought lingered longer than the others, settling somewhere heavy in my chest. Halfway to the market, I noticed I wasn't alone anymore. Footsteps, not mine, matched my pace from a distance. I told myself it was coincidence. People walk these roads all the time. Still, my shoulders tightened without my permission. I adjusted the bag on my arm and kept moving, eyes forward, pretending confidence I didn't fully feel. A voice called out, casual, almost friendly. It asked if I needed help, if I was lost, if it was late to be out alone. I slowed, unsure. There was nothing threatening in the words themselves. In fact, part of me felt relieved, acknowledged, noticed, spoken to. It embarrassed me to admit that. I answered politely, briefly, the way you do when you don't want a conversation but don't want trouble either. The street seemed quieter now, the earlier noises swallowed by the night. The market lights glowed faintly in the distance, close enough to see, far enough to feel unreachable. As I walked, a strange unease crept in, the kind that doesn't announce itself loudly but whispers instead. My instincts nudged me, gently at first, then with more insistence. I ignored them. I had ignored similar feelings before, about my relationship, about the growing distance at home, and nothing terrible had happened then. Why should this be different? I told myself I was overthinking. I told myself to keep walking. I didn't know yet that this ordinary night, this simple errand, was already slipping away from me, turning into something that would divide my life into before and after, whether I was ready or not. The night air was heavy with my racing thoughts as I tried to process what had just happened. My body felt numb, my mind screaming in disbelief, and yet there was a strange, conflicting awareness of my own desires, tangled with guilt and fear. I walked the remaining distance home in silence, every step echoing in my mind like a drumbeat I couldn't escape. The streetlights flickered intermittently, casting long shadows that seemed to mirror my inner turmoil. As soon as I stepped into my room, I locked the door and sank onto the edge of my bed. My hands trembled, and my mind replayed the boy's face, his rough touch, and the sharp intensity of the night. I felt trapped between anger and shame, a swirling storm of emotions that I could not name. Part of me wanted to forget, to pretend it had never happened. Another part, disturbingly, could not stop thinking about the intimacy, the forbidden thrill, and the dangerous pull of what had occurred. I avoided my phone, my friends, my usual distractions. Every sound in the house made me jump, every shadow seemed like a reminder of that night. The taste of fear and something else, something I did not understand, lingered like a stubborn perfume. I knew this would change me, how I saw myself and the world around me. Yet the paradox of pain and inexplicable curiosity gnawed at me. The following days were a haze. I tried to focus on mundane tasks, shopping, tidying, small conversations, but my mind kept drifting back. I remembered how he had smiled, the way he had looked at me like I was something forbidden. I hated myself for thinking about it, yet part of me couldn't help it. It was as if my body remembered what my mind refused to acknowledge. At school or work, I found myself distracted. Every glance, every accidental brush with someone, reminded me of the night. The feeling of helplessness intertwined with a strange, secret excitement I couldn't confess to anyone. I wondered if I could ever trust myself again. Could I distinguish what I wanted from what had been forced? The lines blurred, and I felt like I was slipping into a space I couldn't escape. Then came the first moment of real danger. He called me. The sound of his voice over the phone sent shivers down my spine, part of me recoiling, part of me drawn inexplicably closer. He spoke casually, as if nothing had happened, but I could feel the weight behind his words. Something inside me stirred, a tension between fear, anger, and undeniable intrigue. I knew I had to be careful, yet I couldn't bring myself to hang up. The night had left more than physical marks, it had ignited a storm inside me. And in that storm, I began to question everything about trust, desire, and boundaries. I realized the journey had only just begun, and my mind became a battlefield between what I should feel and what I secretly did. If you want, I can immediately continue to part 3, which will escalate the emotional tension and the morally complex infidelity aspect, while keeping it faceless for video storytelling. Do you want me to do that next? Days turned into nights, and the memory of that evening refused to fade. Each time my phone buzzed, my heart skipped, a mix of dread and anticipation curling in my chest. I knew I shouldn't answer his calls, shouldn't give in to the curiosity and thrill that danced along the edges of my fear, but I did. Each conversation was a dangerous game, filled with teasing, subtle threats, and moments that made my pulse quicken against my better judgment. He began showing up in ways I couldn't anticipate. Sometimes near the market, sometimes in quiet streets I had walked 1,000 times. Always watching, always knowing exactly how to draw me closer. I hated myself for the part of me that wanted to see him, that longed for his attention despite everything. I felt trapped between shame and a dark, thrilling pull I didn't understand. The nights became our secret. Faceless encounters, hidden corners of the city where nobody could see us, and yet the intimacy was undeniable. Every touch, every whispered word, made me feel alive in ways I shouldn't. I was both the victim and the willing participant of a dangerous dance. My own mind felt like a traitor, craving the very thing that should have repulsed me. I tried to rationalize it. It's not real, I whispered to myself during moments alone. It's just desire, just temptation. But the lines blurred with every encounter. I couldn't stop thinking about him during the day, couldn't shake the way my body remembered his presence. I was caught in an internal battle between morality and craving, between loyalty to myself and the secret indulgence that had begun to consume me. At home, I acted normal. I laughed at jokes, helped with chores, and kept up appearances. No one could know how close I was to losing myself in this forbidden connection. The guilt gnawed at me constantly, but it only made the stolen moments more intoxicating. Each meeting felt like a victory and a crime all at once. Then came the moment that scared me most. I realized I was falling for him. Not just drawn to the danger or the thrill, but emotionally, disturbingly, against my own will. Every faceless encounter deepened the connection, every whispered confession made me ache in ways I couldn't admit. I hated the feeling, yet I couldn't resist it. I started imagining a life I couldn't have, a life where his touch didn't carry danger, where desire didn't equal betrayal. And that thought alone terrified me. I knew that giving in completely would mean losing control, losing myself. But the temptation was relentless. My nights were haunted by memory and longing, and my days by the unbearable weight of secrecy. The story had moved beyond one night, beyond a single act of violence. It had become an obsession, a dangerous game of desire and betrayal. And in the middle of it all, I stood trembling, unsure of who I was becoming or how far I was willing to go. If you want, I can now write part 4, which will bring the climax and unresolved ending, perfect for a faceless video that leaves viewers emotionally hooked. Do you want me to proceed with part 4? The tension had reached a breaking point. Each secret meeting felt heavier now, the thrill mixed with an unbearable guilt that gnawed at every thought. I could feel the walls of my conscience cracking, yet I couldn't step back. The line between victim and willing participant had blurred so completely that I no longer recognized myself in the mirror. One night, he appeared at my doorstep, his presence sudden and unannounced. The street was silent, the shadows long, and my pulse raced as if warning me that something irreversible was about to happen. I wanted to close the door, to run, to reclaim the part of me I had lost, but my legs wouldn't move. He stepped in, calm, confident, and familiar in ways that terrified me. The hours that followed were a dangerous mix of desire and fear. Every touch, every whispered word, felt both forbidden and irresistible. I knew that what we were doing was betrayal, not just of myself, but of the life I had been trying to maintain. The knowledge should have stopped me, but it didn't. Instead, it fueled the intensity, making the stolen moments even more consuming. After he left, I collapsed onto the bed, my body trembling, my mind racing. I felt hollow yet alive, ashamed yet exhilarated. I wondered how I could feel so conflicted. How could I crave what had terrified me, desire what had violated me? The moral compass I had relied on for years seemed useless now. The lines between right and wrong had been erased by a single night, then redrawn in darker, more dangerous patterns. Then came the first hint of exposure. A friend had noticed my distant behavior, my distracted glances, the subtle change in my demeanor. I realized with a shiver that secrecy could not last forever. Someone would see, someone would know, and the consequences could shatter everything. The thought terrified me, but in a twisted way, it also added to the allure. Danger had become intoxicating, and I couldn't escape its pull. I lay awake for hours, imagining the future. Could this obsession ever end? Could I ever forgive myself, or him? The questions had no answers, only possibilities, each one darker than the last. My nights were haunted by memory and longing, my days by guilt and anxiety. I was caught in a cycle I couldn't control, addicted to a connection that had no place in the world I lived in. And then, as if mocking me, a text appeared on my phone. Just 3 words, faceless and chilling, "I'm outside, waiting." I froze. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I knew I should lock the door, disappear, reclaim my life, but a part of me, the part that had been drawn into this dangerous game from the very start, wanted to open it. I couldn't tell whether it was fear, desire, or surrender that made my fingers tremble over the lock. The story ended there, not with resolution, but with uncertainty. I was trapped between temptation and morality, desire and regret, fear and longing. The night had begun with a single act that changed everything, and now I didn't know who I was anymore, or what the next moment would bring. The screen fades to black, leaving only the echo of 3 words, and the viewer with a question: what would you do if desire and danger were waiting at your door? If you want, I can now create the title, description, and hashtags for this story, perfectly optimized for a faceless video. This will make it ready for publishing. Do you want me to do that next?